Hey there, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about food. Food? Well, why food? Because you eat every day. You're going to keep eating for the rest of your life, every day. So I figure we should have a conversation about how to eat consciously. This is the kind of thing that once I figured this out for myself, it made a massive difference. It totally shifted the way I approached food and how it impacted my life. And I feel like I just want to share that with you in case maybe it'll help you too. So if you're interested, let's get into it. All right, so first thing we need to talk about, just like the last video, is what exactly are we talking about? Let's kind of define it a little bit. When I say eating consciously, just like how to live consciously, how to eat consciously is essentially eating on purpose, intentionally, actively choosing what we're putting in our mouth. And there's way more we could go into in future videos, like how we eat and how to approach it and all that kind of stuff. But the main thing is, food has been spoken about in so many videos by so many people. People have written tons of books and made entire cooking shows, recipes, so much. But specifically in this video, I want to talk about the process of eating consciously, because this has made a huge difference in the way that I look at food and how I interact with it and the consequences it has on me. And it has also given me the tools to sort of navigate that massive world of food literature and science and diets and all that kind of stuff. So that leads me to why. Why does this matter? Well, as you probably have noticed, there's a lot to say about food. So much, in fact, that people have made entire industries around it. There are companies which focus on how do I create food which tricks your tongue into wanting it, and how do I make people crave food so I can sell more of it. There's other aspects like maybe you don't know what kind of diet to have. Do I want this kind or that kind? Well, I grew up with this, but maybe this is better. I don't know. And then you try and get into the science of it, and there's just so much. So what I found was this one kind of simple thing that if I applied it to myself, I found that a little bit like a compass, it helped guided me toward what was working for me and what wasn't working for me. And that helped tremendously, because if you do this, then you don't need to be so overwhelmed by all of the food information out there. And instead, you can just take it one day at a time, focus on one thing at a time, and figure it out for yourself what's working. So that's kind of the why. I want you to be empowered. I want you to have the ability to know, okay, this particular type of food, this fruit, this vegetable, this meat, this grain, this whatever, this is how it's impacting my system, and that's how I can feel about it. And then you can make better choices in the future based on that. That's really important. And it had a huge impact on me, especially when I started traveling, when I started going around the world and trying all different kinds of foods. I was able to see what was working and what wasn't. And the other thing is, like, why? Because, like I was saying, a lot of companies have figured out how to sort of hijack your tongue. Your tongue naturally is drawn toward salts and fats and sugars and oils and things like this, because in nature those wouldn't be so available, but they would also be really rich sources of like nutrients. So in like way back olden days, these were good things. So the tongue was naturally creating a sort of a compulsion to eat those kind of foods. But now we have French fries and deep fried oil things and sugary sweets and all kinds of stuff that are way, like, there was no cupcake tree that just pooped out cupcakes. Like, that's not a thing that happened. So when trees and other plants were giving fruits and stuff, it was sweet and you liked it, but it wasn't, like, for example, a sugar cane. There is a lot of sugar in sugar cane, but if you've ever tried to actually eat a sugar cane, it's an involved process. It's like a giant grass, kind of a bamboo looking thing, and you just kind of gnaw on it and slowly get sweetness. And it also had all kinds of other vitamins and minerals and nutrients. But when you process that into white, like powdered sugar, it's a totally different thing. And it doesn't have all the extra bits and bobs that nature gave to make it a little bit more balanced. So different world, a whole new world. That's where we are. So let's see how to actually eat consciously so that we can navigate this world in a way that works for us, right? Okay, how? The first thing I want to say is this. When you go to eat something, what a lot of people do is they're sitting on TV, like they've got, something going on, or their phone, maybe you're watching videos, and you're just kind of like mindlessly eating whatever you're eating. So the meal you usually go for is the quickest thing because we live in a busy world and we're also distracting ourselves with something else. Or even if we're just talking to other people, we're still fully engaged with the other person, but not with the food itself. And so that leads to you only being concerned. I'm generalizing, maybe your specific situation is different, but a lot of people, this is true. They're more focused on what the tongue is enjoying and less on the whole rest of the digestive tract. And that makes sense. You only have taste buds on the tongue, right? So there's that. But when you talk about like how to eat consciously, what worked for me was this. I started, first of all, removing the distractions, because the more you're distracted, the less you're paying attention to the food. And specifically, like when you say you take a bite of something, if you take a bite of something and it tastes good, that's usually a good sign, right? But there's more steps involved. So then, like, you swallow, it's in your stomach, or say the meal's over. Now you've got this feeling. Okay, how do I feel? As I was eating, was I feeling like you've probably had this happen where you ate too much of one thing and you started feeling like almost like, oh, I'm so tired of this food. Or you were just eating, not paying attention, and then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, I'm so stuffed. Your body was actually the whole time giving you signals that this is too much or this is the wrong balance. For example, way too sweet, you're eating too many sugary things. You start feeling like a little sick. And if you're paying attention, you can notice as you're eating, oh, you know what? As I'm eating this, each bite is becoming a little bit less palatable. It's less enjoyable to keep eating this. That's usually a sign to stop. And either because you're full or because it's too much. Often in the West, it's too much sugar, but it could be too much of other things too. Like you want a balanced meal that has lots of different tastes. Even if the meal itself doesn't have different tastes, throughout the like as you keep going through different meals, ideally you would be changing it up with different kinds of flavors and foods, so that the balance is there. When I was in the ashram, they would do this very intentionally. The people in the kitchen they crafted an entire meal plan that involved different tastes and different days, and not just sporadically. They went into a whole thing about it. Like there were different seasons, and based on the season, they would have different types of food. Because it's not just about what's locally available. It's about how that food impacts you, right? So some things will sort of generate kind of a heat in the system. So you wouldn't want that when it's like peak heat in the summer, but it's great in the winter because it's sort of generating a little heat, a little fire in the digestion, right? But at the same time, some other foods can be cooling. So you wouldn't want that in the winter. You would want that in the summer. So you see what I'm saying? There's different seasons. And this would be very natural. So for example, if you live in a place where they have watermelon growing in the summer, watermelon could be considered as like a cooling food, or cucumbers could be like a cooling food. So that's getting a bit more into the science, but I'm just trying to illustrate to you that if you eat things, you can pay attention to how it's impacting the system. And at first, maybe you won't be able to notice so much, but if you just pay attention to this instead of all the other stuff outside, you'll start noticing these things. You'll notice like, okay, when I started this process, I used to love Chipotle burritos. I liked, there's something called barbacoa beef. I think it's beef, which is like cow meat. And I had loved this particular flavor, the way they seasoned it, and like in this burrito, and it was big and beautiful and tasty. And I would love eating these, but every time I ate it, I felt so heavy. I felt like, ugh, and I would get kind of sleepy afterward. And then I didn't really want to do anything. Gave that a lot of lethargy. I wasn't thinking about it. But as I started paying attention, I realized this. So I tried shifting, just a minor change. I thought, well, let me try a veggie burrito, right? So vegetables, I still had the salsas and all the other stuff, but I didn't have the meat in it, just to try, because my grandfather had a cattle ranch. So I kind of grew up eating meat all the time, but I didn't know what it meant to not eat meat. So I just thought I'll try it, just an experiment to see what happens, to see how I feel. And sure enough, I tried it and I felt lighter. I didn't feel quite as heavy. Now, it's been many years since this process started and I've experimented a lot. And now I find that often I can eat just like half of that. I instead of the burrito, I'll do like a burrito bowl. I can eat like half the bowl and now it's good enough for one meal. So I sometimes, if I'm not so hungry, I'll just split with my wife, like half. But that's just one example of how you can make a slight modification. It doesn't have to be going vegetarian. If you eat meat, I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. It's not about prescribing you a specific diet, but rather you learning to pay attention to your body and let your body tell you what feels like the correct food and what doesn't. Another example is you might find that perhaps the food that you are eating, your regular diet, is not balanced. When I say not balanced, some people are not having enough protein. Some people are having too much protein. And it's not that I want you counting calories and trying to observe everything. It's just observing if you have, so for example, when I'm in India, a lot of families eat large quantities of rice with a small amount of curry, and that curry usually doesn't have much of a source of protein. Not always, there's plenty of dishes that do, but when I'm just looking at people's daily home-cooked meals, sometimes this is the case. So when that's the case, you're actually not getting enough of a dense source of nutrients. So whether it's a meat or beans, legumes, something like this that's got that richness, that protein in it, something like this can give a much longer sense of being full. So then you're not so hungry later and you're not snacking as much. Which leads to another thing. You might just pay attention to a whole bunch of different factors, right? When you eat, how quickly are you becoming hungry again? And how satisfied are you after the meal? Do you feel thirsty after the meal? Something I've noticed is like, if the meal is super oily, a lot of times I'll want to drink a lot of water. And what I've found when that's the case is that not only am I sort of affecting the way my body is digesting by drinking a bunch of water after I'm eating, so that itself is causing problems. Then you're getting like burps every now and then, and you can like taste the food, you know? So when that's happening, that's kind of a sign your body's telling you it's not quickly and easily digesting this food. You know, if you eat a meal and then like an hour or two later you're burping and you still taste it, ideally it should have been out of the stomach by then, right? So these are just indicators the body's giving you. It's giving you all the signs. It's just about paying attention to it. If you start paying attention to these kind of things and start seeing less about what's going on, less about watching stuff, and also after the meal, just check in with your body. How do I feel? Does it feel good or does it feel bad? You can even, if you want, you can try, if you're the list making kind or you like data, you're that kind, then just make a small journal and just write down what you ate that day and then how you felt about it, like later on. So you could do this maybe at the end of the day. Just take like 5 minutes. You can type in your phone or write it down in a book. Just write down what kind of foods you ate and how you felt later on. Did you feel full? Did you feel sleepy? Were you alert and alive and awake? There's so many things we can go into with food, but this is the starting point that I would suggest because this is what really worked for me. This is how I started consciously crafting the kind of diet that was effective for me. And also, this is not something you do just once and then you're done. It's a constant process because as you move through your life, you might get a different job, you might start up different activities, and your diet will have to adjust accordingly because your food is the fuel, so you need the appropriate kind of fuel for the activity that you're doing. And if you listen to your body, it's usually pretty honest in telling you what it's feeling. And if you can figure out how to listen to your own body, then you won't need so much extra support from all these other people telling you all the right ways to eat and blah, 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 blah. You can simply listen to what someone has to say if you're curious, and then listen to it and check with your body. Does this line up? Does this work for me? And then you know for sure what's working for you and what's not. And that is the most important part. I want you to know, for you to have the tools in your hands, for you to live well and enjoy your life and have as much energy as possible. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's helpful. Please tell me if it is, like what you feel about it. And if you try it, does it work for you? Do you have other things that you do for eating consciously? Like, what's been effective for you? What's your process? Tell me all this kind of stuff. And of course, the obvious, if you like this, please give a like. I'd appreciate it because, we're not really sponsored by anyone here. So it's just you. And these likes help me. So I'd appreciate it. Also, if you want more content like this, please subscribe. The obvious thing, like, subscribe, comment, all those kind of things that the YouTubers say to do. Always appreciated. It helps with the algorithm and all that stuff. But most importantly, I hope that you're able to make use of what I'm talking about in the video. So with that said, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next time.